divide name. Oops, sorry, I lost the signal there for a sec. Let me make sure everything's fine. Hold on the stream. Looks good. Alright, cool. Alright, so I take name. Actually, I don't want to take name. I want to take float name. So what I'm doing here is I'm telling I want to use name as a float. And then I want to divide that by 2. That gives me 4.5 now. So what I'm doing here, that's exactly how you concatenate, or sorry, you cast stuff, not concatenate. You cast things to a certain type. So in this case, float. I can also cast it to a string. So if I do str, that's string in Python. Name. Now it gives me 9 in single quotation marks, which is a string. This doesn't actually change the value of your variable. If I go to print name again, you'll notice it's still an integer. It actually only uses that for whatever statement you're working with. So in this case, here it gave me a float back. It returned a float. Here it returned a string, but the variable remains unchanged. It's still an integer. So again, to review real quick, we have strings, integers, floats. There are other kinds, but this is what we're using now. And you cannot combine them. Well, Python will actually cast them for you, but it's important to remember their difference because there are occasions where you want to have control over what kind of variable you're working with, whether it's a float, integer, etc. Otherwise, you'll end up with like if you're doing math calculations, you'll end in the context of games. If you're trying to do some health calculations or you're trying to do some stats, you're going to get inaccurate values because if you're trying to divide an int by int, which is short for integer, by another int, you're going to end up with a truncated number or a rounded down number. Actually, I think it's truncated. Truncates the value. So if you're trying to add, for example, let me just run it through here. If I do name, whoops, sorry, name divided by 2. Let me put that all in parentheses. So name divided by 2. So that's going to give me, in theory, that should be 4.5, right? Because that's half of 9. And I multiply that by 3. So that should give me 13.5. Instead, I get 12 because it took not name divided by 2. It truncated down to 4. Then it multiplied that by 3. Whereas if I had done, for example, float name divided by 2, and I multiplied that by 3, then I get 13.5 because I cast it to a float first. So these are important concepts to remember in Python. And in other languages, except Python just actually makes it a little bit easier for you. Alrighty, so now that we've gone over variables, we did our very simple hello world. I'm going to go over one last thing here, which is functions. Now, if we wanted a function to do these things for us every time we call that function, so we have a set of steps. For example, our input request. What we do here is we call a function called, let's say, your name. Okay? That's the name of the function. So the way we declare functions in Python, and I'll explain to you as I go what exactly it does, is you'll def, which is define, define function, which we're going to call your name. And we use these parentheses here for passing values to this function. In this case, we're not going to go over that. Just remember they have to be there for functions, even if we're not using them. And then we use a colon, as I showed you earlier, to define where this function starts. You notice idle will automatically indent the next block for me, which is cool. Whoops. Control save. Okay. So now I want to, every time I call your name, it's going to execute every single line inside of there. So I want to put my original code in there, which was defining name. And name equals raw input, and we're going to ask for your name. Okay, and then I'm going to print name. Actually, I'm going to print hello, comma, plus name. So it's going to print hello, comma, and then the value of name in there. And let's, so that we make this a little more useful, then we'll say, what else can we do? We'll just leave it at that. Alright, cool. So this, I'm going to demonstrate two principles here now. Let me start off with just the principle of a function. You notice nothing actually happened, even though I have this code here for a function with the same stuff we used earlier. The reason for that is because you have to call a function after you've declared it. So here you defined it, you declared it, now you actually have to call it. So when I call your name, remember spelling is important. So then it actually starts to run the code in there. So I say Ray is my name, and it says hello Ray. Awesome. So that executed the function. Now something interesting. Now that I have the function, I'm going to try to call name again. So I say print name. Oh, wait a second, there's a problem. Name is not defined. But I clearly just used it here in the previous code. Well, here we get into variable scope, which is an important concept. What this means is that a variable is declared either locally or globally. What that means is if it's global, you declare it outside any functions or classes, meaning up here, outside of the indentation. That would make it global. That means that any function or any class inside the script can access it. But if you make it local, in essence you're doing that here by declaring it inside of this function. It's only available from inside this function. So to illustrate the point here, if I were to declare name up here, that means I'm making it global, right? So if I make it global, and here I'm just editing that variable, I'm going to be able to access it from outside of the function. So again, I'm going to call your name, and say Ray. Alright, great. So when I go to print name, print name, I get nothing. So you notice here what we have is two different variables. We have a variable that is one called name that exists in a global space, and one called name that exists in the local space. So how do I access this? I want to change the global value inside of my variable, or sorry, inside of my function. The way you do that is you give it self, which self means you're referring to the program itself. And I'll show you how this works. So if you do your name again, right? Oops, had an issue. You have to pass self to the function. So this goes back to passing functions. I want to give self to this function. You don't actually have to actually, before I make a fool of myself, let me try it out. I don't think you actually have to explicitly type it out in Python. Yeah, you actually have to pass it. Hold on. Your name self. Alright. Am I missing something here? Hold on one second. So I have name, I think this is for classes, is how that works. So you want to do self. This. Oh, okay. Alright. So you want to actually use this, which is referring to yourself, I think. Hold on. We'll find out together, huh? It's been a while since I've used Python, or basic Python, so excuse me. Alright, so this is not defined, so then you would want to pass self, I believe. Alright, you know what, this is actually not, I'm thinking of classes. I'm totally confusing you guys. So let's ignore the last couple minutes of what I've been doing. Alright, what we want to do is pass a variable called name. Actually, I'm going to call this function yn name, just for your name, and yn name. And let's see, I can't remember if Python passes by value or reference. We'll find out right now if this works. So we'll run it. The good thing about Python is that it's interpreted. You don't actually have to be yeah, no, this is actually not going to work. So we want to do self dot your name, right? Okay, so self, your name, self is not defined. How do we do this? Well, when all else fails, and I'm going to show you the most important tool to a programmer, it's called google.com. And it's not Google, it's google.com. Alright, so Python passing by value, or actually by reference. So let me explain real quick what I'm talking about here, so you don't get confused, or any further confused by my own confusion. When you pass something by value, I could pass to this whatever's inside of name, which is nothing, and it'll update for me. But when I still try to access this, it's still going to give me back nothing, even though I already saved my value in there. So let me show you. If I do your name, and I pass to it the variable name, so I'm giving it this variable, and it's going to be called your name, so we track it, so they're not all called the same. So whatever's inside name, I'm going to pass on to here. So the name, this value here, I'm passing by value right now, which is nothing. I'm going to change it to be equal to whatever I type in, so which is Ray. So it says hello blank. Is that right? No, that's not correct. Oh, okay. So here I'm printing name, or the original name. So hold on. Change that to the name inside a function. Okay. So I'm passing that value to it, but you'll notice right away, I mean, it's kind of obvious, you're not going to be changing the value of what's out here. You're not ever returning that value back to it. And I think actually that's what I need to do, but I'll find out real quick. So, again, we'll call your name, yn name, or sorry, name, okay, Ray, hello Ray, and I print name, it's blank, which is fine, it's the original value, and I try to print yn